My name is Olivia Wallace, and I'm 32 years old. I had no idea my life would change like this. Everything happened in one night. We were preparing for the wedding. I was dreaming of a perfect future, but what I got was a prenuptial agreement I never could have imagined. Cassidy, the woman I loved and had been with for so long, suddenly placed a document in front of me, demanding I sign it if I wanted the wedding to happen. I read through it, and a feeling of shock overwhelmed me. What did she want? Half of the house I had worked so hard to build, and half of the business I had created from scratch. She simply said, "Sign this, or the wedding's off." I didn't know what to do. It was a mental shock. She wasn't just asking for control over my property, but she made me feel like I was being pushed out of my own life. And her words echoed in my mind, "What's yours will be ours, because we'll be married." That was the moment I realized I couldn't move forward in this relationship. It wasn't love, it was a business transaction in disguise. But I couldn't let her think I was cornered. I called my lawyer, and what happened next was something she would never expect. I've built my career from the ground up, working as a marketing manager for a successful tech company. I have a solid job, a small apartment in the city, and friends I can count on. Life had always felt predictable, like I had everything under control. But when I met Ryan, everything changed. Ryan was different. He wasn't just another guy I met at a party or through work. He was genuine, ambitious, and had this quiet confidence that drew me in. We met 2 years ago through a mutual friend at a social gathering. He was a contractor owning a small but growing construction business, and immediately I was impressed by his down-to-earth nature and the way he spoke about his work. He wasn't one for flashy talk, but I could tell he was passionate about his career. As we spent more time together, it became clear that we both shared a love for building things from the ground up, whether it was his business or my career. We both loved the idea of creating something meaningful with our own hands. Our relationship grew quickly. We were both ambitious and excited about the future. We'd talk for hours about our dreams and plans, about our vision of a life built on hard work and mutual respect. There were always small signs, though, things I brushed aside because I was so in love. Ryan would often speak about his family, especially his mother, with a certain reverence. He would say things like, "My mom always taught me that you need to protect what's yours." At first, I thought it was just family pride, but looking back, I can see that he was instilled with an almost obsessive need to keep control over his assets, control that would later extend to me. We moved in together after just 6 months, and everything felt right. Ryan would come home after a long day of work, tired but satisfied with his progress on the job sites. He'd show me pictures of the projects he was working on, and I'd listen intently, offering my support and encouragement. But as we got more serious, there were more signs of his expectations of me. He would talk about how we would grow our future together, but it always had a certain tone of, "This is how it's going to be," as though he was setting up a plan for both of us, without ever truly including me in the decision-making. I began to feel like I was more of an accessory to his success than an equal partner. Looking back, I see the warning signs, but I ignored them. I ignored how his family subtly questioned my contributions to the relationship, as if I were just a pretty face, rather than a woman with my own ambitions and goals. I ignored the way Ryan would mention that women like me could never understand the value of a man's hard work. But I loved him, and at the time, that was enough to drown out the little voices in my head that whispered, "Something's off." Then came the day when everything changed. It started with little things at first, subtle changes that I didn't pay much attention to. Ryan began acting strangely when it came to finances. We had always been open with each other about money, how we were saving, how we were planning for the future. But suddenly, Ryan started talking about protecting assets more frequently. It wasn't just about his business anymore. It was about everything we had. He would talk about securing things for the long term, not just for us, but for our families as well. I thought it was strange, but I chalked it up to him being practical. Maybe he just wanted to make sure we were taken care of. But then came the first major red flag. Ryan started bringing up the idea of a prenuptial agreement. "I think it's a good idea, Olivia," he said one evening, casually as we sat on the couch, scrolling through our phones. "You know, just to protect both of us. You never know what could happen, and it'll make everything smoother if we ever face hard times." I had no idea what to say at first. A prenup? We were planning to get married, not anticipating a divorce. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. I brushed it off as a practical move, something that people in his line of work, a contractor, might do. He was always meticulous, always thinking ahead. So, I agreed, hesitantly. But then Ryan started pushing the conversation more. It wasn't about protecting my assets anymore. It became about protecting his. I've worked really hard for what I have, Olivia, he'd say, his tone shifting as though he were justifying something that didn't need justification. And I want to make sure that my work is protected. At the time, I thought it was just a way for him to safeguard his business, which made sense. What didn't make sense was how often he referred to his wealth as something he built, and how often he mentioned how hard it is to find someone who appreciates that. The deeper I got into this relationship, the more I realized I was being subtly cast aside in favor of his business and his success. Still, I ignored my discomfort. But then came the night when everything changed. It was a Tuesday after work when he called me into the living room. There, on the coffee table, was a thick stack of papers. Papers I had no idea were coming. "I had my lawyer draw this up," Ryan said, his voice steady but firm. "It's time we protect our future." I looked at the papers in confusion, trying to make sense of what was happening. Ryan, usually so calm, had an edge to his voice that I couldn't quite place. I began reading through it, skimming through the legal jargon, and as I did, my heart began to sink. It wasn't just a simple prenup. It wasn't just about keeping things separate. No, this was something much worse. The document was clear. He was demanding I relinquish half of everything I had worked for in my life, from my savings to my home. Everything would be his if I married him. The words hit me like a ton of bricks, and my mind went blank. I stared at the paper, my thoughts racing. I had no idea how to respond. "This isn't right, Ryan," I said, my voice shaky, but trying to remain calm. "This isn't what we agreed on. We were supposed to be partners." His response? Cold. "You'll understand, Olivia. Once we're married, we'll be one. Everything you have, everything I have, it'll be ours, together." But that wasn't the part that shook me. The part that made my blood run cold was what came next. Cassidy had made sure that not only would I lose my financial independence, but I'd also have no say in the future of the business I had worked so hard to build. Ryan's cold, calculated words cut through me like a blade. "You'll need to trust me. Wives deserve security, and I'm securing us both." And just like that, my entire perception of the future I thought we had planned shattered. This was no longer about love, about partnership, about growing together. This was a business arrangement, one I was not prepared for. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation, the document, Ryan's words. "You'll need to trust me," he'd said. But the trust I had in him was gone, slipping away with every passing hour. The life I thought we were building together suddenly seemed like a facade. I had always admired his ambition, his drive, but now it felt like I was just another pawn in his plan. I woke up the next morning still reeling from the shock, but I had to face him. I needed answers. There was no way I was going to sign away everything I had worked for, everything that made me, me. I tried to act normal as I walked into the kitchen, but Ryan's eyes followed me as I moved. There was no warmth, no affection. It was as if we were two strangers sharing a space. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. The man I loved didn't see our relationship as a transaction. He didn't use his business as a tool to manipulate me. "Olivia," he said, his voice calm, but I could hear the underlying tension. "Have you thought about what I said?" I stared at him, trying to keep my emotions in check. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let him see how deeply his actions had hurt me. "Ryan, I've read that agreement. You want half of everything, my savings, my house, everything I've worked for." His eyes never wavered, and that only made me angrier. "It's not just about the money, Olivia. It's about protecting us. This is how it's done in marriage." "Protecting us?" I wanted to scream. "Protecting us?" This wasn't about protection. This was about control. But instead of yelling, I took a deep breath. I needed to make him understand, or at least try to. "Why do you need my house, Ryan? Why do you need half of everything I've earned before we even got together?" "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. Ryan's response was cold and calculated, but somehow that made it even worse. "Because that's what you do for your partner. You don't just keep things separate, you build together. I'm not asking for more than what's fair." "Fair?" I repeated, my chest tightening. "How is it fair that I lose everything I've built, everything that I've worked for, simply because we get married. Ryan's face softened, and I could see the manipulation in his eyes. Olivia, you don't get it. This is how the world works. This is what women who marry successful men do. They help build the future. You're part of my world now. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. I stared at him, stunned into silence. His words cut deeper than any physical blow. It wasn't just the house or the business. It was the utter lack of respect for me as an individual. This was not love. It was control disguised as protection. You're not marrying me for me, are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You're marrying me for what I can give you, my assets, my future, my work. Ryan's jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his facade. Olivia, I'm not asking for everything, just enough to secure both of us. You'll see. One day, you'll be grateful for this. But all I could feel was a growing sense of betrayal. I had been blindsided by someone I thought I knew, someone I thought I could trust. All this time, Ryan had been planning for the future, not ours, but his. His plan had nothing to do with partnership or love. It was about ownership. You want me to sign my life away, I said softly, barely able to process the words as they left my mouth. You want my house, my business, my savings. And for what? So that you can feel secure? I've built everything I have on my own, and now you're telling me that everything I've worked for, everything that's mine, belongs to you because you're my husband? Ryan didn't answer. He simply looked at me, waiting for me to come around, waiting for me to see things his way. But I wasn't the woman he thought I was. I wasn't going to let him take everything I had worked for, everything I had earned, just because he thought he was entitled to it. The next few minutes felt like hours. I stood there, frozen, torn between the man I thought I knew and the reality of the situation. But as I looked at him, something inside me snapped. I won't sign this, Ryan, I said, my voice steady and firm. I won't give you control over my life, my work, my future. His face twisted with frustration, and for a moment I thought he might explode. But he didn't. Instead, he just shook his head as if he were disappointed in me. You don't understand, Olivia. I'm doing this for us. I turned away from him, the weight of everything crashing down on me. There was no us anymore, not the way I had imagined. The man I thought I was going to marry had vanished, replaced by a man who saw me not as his equal, but as someone to be controlled. And as the silence between us stretched on, I realized that this was no longer a partnership. It was a power struggle, and I wasn't going to lose. The silence in the room felt deafening. Ryan stood there, still holding the prenup in his hands, but it felt like everything had shifted. The man I thought I knew, the one who spoke about building a future together, had suddenly turned into a stranger, someone who saw me not as a partner, but as an asset to claim. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing as I walked away from him, needing space to think. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I was in shock, completely thrown off balance by the man I had once trusted more than anyone. Olivia, Ryan's voice broke through the haze in my mind, calling me back. But I couldn't face him, not yet. I needed to process this. Everything had been turned upside down in a matter of hours, and I couldn't seem to find my footing. I walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind me, but it felt like I had just shut out the world. I could hear Ryan's footsteps behind me, his voice getting more frantic. Olivia, please, I'm just trying to protect us. Don't you see? This is what we need. I couldn't respond. I was too angry, too hurt, too betrayed. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I buried my face in my hands, trying to stop the overwhelming flood of emotions. I had spent so many years building my life, my career, and everything I had worked for. I was proud of who I had become, the independence I had fought so hard to achieve, and now it felt like Ryan wanted to strip that away. He wanted to take everything from me, not because we were a team, but because he felt entitled to it, simply because we were about to get married. My mind was racing. Why hadn't I seen this before? All those little warning signs, the way he would talk about his business, the way he constantly made me feel like I had to prove myself, the subtle digs at my independence, my career, the implication that I wasn't enough on my own. It was all there, but I had been too in love, too blinded by the idea of us to see it. I felt so foolish. But then I heard his voice again, soft but desperate, from the other side of the door. Olivia, I love you. I just want what's best for us. You're overreacting. Please, let's talk about this. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. This wasn't just about a prenup anymore. It was about trust. It was about respect. And at that moment, I realized how little respect Ryan had for me, how little he had ever truly seen me as an equal. I stood up, walking to the door, and as I opened it, I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. His hands were trembling slightly, but he didn't back down. "I just want us to be secure," he repeated, almost pleading. I looked at him, and for the first time, I really saw him. Not the man I had fallen in love with, but the man who thought he could control me. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, cutting through the fog of confusion and anger. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me, take everything I had built, and call it protection. "No, Ryan," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "You don't get it. This is about control, not security. And I'm not going to let you take what's mine, no matter how much you try to justify it." Ryan's expression faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. For a moment, I thought he might back off. But instead, he stepped closer, trying to close the gap between us. "You don't understand. This is for us. I'm doing this for us, Olivia." But I shook my head, a deep sense of finality settling in my chest. "No, Ryan, you're doing this for yourself. You don't see me. You don't see the woman I am. You see me as a way to protect your assets, to build your empire. And that's not love. That's manipulation." For a moment, there was silence. Ryan looked at me, his face a mixture of frustration and disbelief, but I could see the crack in his mask. The man who had once been so sure of himself was now unsure, vulnerable, and confused. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his validation. I was strong enough to stand on my own, without him. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I won't sign that prenup, and I won't marry you under these conditions." Ryan's face twisted in anger, and for a second I thought he might lash out. But then his shoulders slumped, and he stepped back as if defeated. "So, that's it?" he asked, his voice low, hurt. "You're walking away from everything we've built?" I looked him in the eyes, my own heart breaking for what could have been. "No, Ryan. You're the one walking away from everything we could have been. Because love isn't about ownership, it's about partnership, and you don't understand that." I turned away then, knowing that walking away was the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. But in that moment, I knew it was the right choice, the only choice. I had to take control of my own life. For once, it was my turn to protect what was mine. The days that followed felt like a blur. I didn't expect things to settle easily after the confrontation, but nothing could have prepared me for how things escalated. Ryan wasn't just angry. He was determined to get what he felt he was entitled to, and he made it clear that our relationship wasn't going to end quietly. I spent most of the next week trying to put distance between us, but Ryan wasn't ready to let go. Every time I thought things had calmed down, I'd find another surprise waiting for me. Another message, another call, another attempt to make me change my mind. His texts were filled with manipulation disguised as love. "I love you, Olivia. You're the one I want to be with. This is just about security." But I wasn't buying it anymore. The more he said it, the more I realized just how deeply ingrained his need for control really was. Then his family stepped in. I should have known it would come to this, but I wasn't prepared for how insistent they would be. Ryan's mother, who I had always tried to get along with, called me one evening. Her voice, usually warm and kind, was now cold, even a little sharp. "Olivia, we need to talk," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I understand you're upset, but Ryan is only trying to protect his future, and yours too, of course. Don't you think you're overreacting a little?" I was speechless for a moment. Overreacting? I hadn't overreacted when I first discovered Ryan was trying to take everything I had built? "I'm not overreacting," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about protection. It's about control. And I'm not going to be controlled. Not by Ryan, not by anyone." "Sweetheart, you don't understand," she continued, her voice turning patronizing. "This is what marriage is. You're supposed to share everything. Ryan's doing this because he cares about you. He wants you to be part of his world, part of everything he's worked for." I couldn't believe it. I thought I knew Ryan's mother, but now I realized just how much of their family dynamic revolved around this idea of ownership. It wasn't about partnership, it was about possession. "I can't do this," I said, cutting the conversation short. "Please, just tell Ryan to stop. I'm done." But Ryan wasn't stopping. The calls kept coming, and every time he was more insistent. "Olivia, please. This is just a misunderstanding. If you sign the prenup, everything will be fine. We'll get married, and everything will be just like we planned." His words were smooth, practiced, as though he was repeating the same script in his head over and over. But I had heard enough. I called Tank the next day. He was one of Ryan's oldest friends and my only real ally in this mess. He had always been supportive of our relationship, but I knew that the tension between us was only going to grow. "Tank, I need to talk to you," I said when he picked up. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of this. Whatever it is that Ryan's trying to pull. He's pushing me into something I don't want, and I need to know if I'm missing something." "Olivia," he said softly, "you're not missing anything. I've seen Ryan change over the last few months. He's been more obsessed with his business than I've ever seen him. I think he's been under a lot of pressure from his family, and it's starting to come out. But don't let him manipulate you into thinking this is about love. It's not." I felt a weight lift off my chest, just hearing his support. But that weight quickly returned when I saw Ryan the next day. He was waiting for me outside my apartment when I got home from work, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Frustration, anger, and maybe even a little desperation. "Olivia, please," he said as I walked toward the door, blocking my path. "I love you. Don't throw this away over a piece of paper. I'll fix it, I promise. Just let me explain." I shook my head, refusing to let him in. "Ryan, I've heard enough. You've made your intentions clear, and now I'm making mine clear. I'm done." His face turned red, and for the first time, I saw the mask slip. He wasn't the calm, collected man I had fallen in love with. Now he was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. "You're making a huge mistake, Olivia," he spat, his words dripping with contempt. "You'll never find someone who'll love you the way I do. You'll never be good enough for anyone else. You're nothing without me." His words stung, but they didn't break me. In that moment, I realized that this was not the man I had loved. This was a stranger trying to manipulate me into submission, trying to make me believe I couldn't survive without him. And in the clearest moment of clarity, I understood that I could. I had to. "Goodbye, Ryan," I said firmly, pushing past him to open the door, "and I hope you learn what real love means someday." As I closed the door behind me, I could hear his muffled voice pleading from the other side, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. That night, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. But as the hours passed, the weight on my chest began to lift. I had made the right choice. I was taking control of my life, my future. I didn't need Ryan, and I didn't need his family's approval. I was strong enough to stand on my own, and that realization was the beginning of something far more empowering than anything I had ever imagined. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I spent more time alone than I had in years, trying to process everything that had happened. What Ryan had said to me kept echoing in my mind. "You'll never find someone who'll love you the way I do. You're nothing without me." His words cut deep, much deeper than I wanted to admit. I had been strong, standing firm in my decision, but the loneliness gnawed at me, especially at night when everything felt quieter and the silence was overwhelming. I spent my days at work, forcing myself to focus on tasks I had always excelled at. But even at the office, I couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw a dozen missed calls from Ryan, a dozen messages filled with apologies and promises to change. But I couldn't believe him anymore. The man I had loved, the one I had trusted, was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I tried to go out with friends, but even their company couldn't fill the emptiness I felt inside. I began questioning everything. Had I really missed all the signs? Was I that naive to not see how much of this was about control, not love? My mind kept returning to the moment when he tried to justify the prenup, when he said he was doing this for our future, when in reality, he was doing it for his own selfish desires. I had been so in love with the idea of us, of our future, that I had ignored the cracks in the foundation of our relationship. I had ignored the way he looked at me sometimes, as though he were trying to figure out how much of me he could take. I had ignored the subtle jabs at my career, my independence, the comments that made me feel like I had to prove myself every single day. And worst of all, I had ignored the way he made me feel small, like I was just an accessory to his success, rather than a partner in it. I'd always been a strong woman. I had built my career from scratch, carved out a life for myself, and fought through so much to get to where I was. But now it felt like the life I had built was slipping through my fingers. I had lost Ryan, yes, but I had also lost part of myself in the process. I was sitting in my apartment one evening, staring out the window at the city lights, when I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, hoping it was Ryan, but I knew it wasn't. I had blocked his number, and I wasn't about to let him back in. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Tank standing there, his face serious but soft with concern. "Olivia," he said, stepping inside, "I need to talk to you." I didn't say anything at first. I just motioned for him to sit down, and we both ended up sitting in the living room, in the quiet that had become my constant companion. "I know this is hard," Tank began, breaking the silence, "but I need you to hear me out. Ryan, he's not the guy you think he is anymore. I've been friends with him for a long time, and I've never seen him act like this. He's changed, and it's not just because of the prenup." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I don't even know who he is anymore, Tank. Everything I thought we had, it's gone. And I feel like I'm the one who's been played." Tank shook his head. "You're not the one who's been played, Olivia. He's been playing himself. This whole thing with the prenup, with the business, with trying to control everything, this isn't about you. It's about him. And it's about his own insecurities, his own fears." "I don't care about his insecurities anymore, Tank," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "He crossed a line. He used me. He doesn't get to just walk away from this." Tank looked at me, his eyes softening. "I'm not saying you should let him off the hook, but don't let him win. Don't let his actions make you question yourself, Olivia. You've got to remember who you are. You've worked too hard to let this break you." I paused, taking in his words. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. I had let Ryan's actions consume me. I had let his betrayal make me question my own worth. But Tank was right. I had built my life from the ground up. I wasn't going to let one man's mistakes, one man's need for control, define me. "You're right," I said, my voice steadier now. "I can't let him do this to me. I can't let him tear me down. I've worked too hard for everything I have, and I won't let him take it. I won't let him take me." Tank nodded, a small smile forming on his face. "Exactly. You're stronger than this, Olivia. You've always been. You've got this." As he left that night, I finally felt the weight of the last few days start to lift. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I had to move on. I had to let go of the version of Ryan I had created in my head, the man I had fallen in love with, and face the reality that the man he had become was someone I couldn't trust. It wasn't just about moving on from Ryan anymore. It was about rediscovering myself, reclaiming my power, and standing firm in the life I had built. No one, not even the man I had loved, could take that away from me. I woke up the next morning feeling different. It wasn't just the calm after the storm. It was something deeper. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't the silence in my apartment or the absence of Ryan's calls that gave me peace. It was the clarity that came with the decision I had made. I was done. I wasn't going to let Ryan's manipulation rule my life any longer. I wasn't going to let him twist my emotions or control my future. But the hardest part was still ahead. I needed to face him one last time, not to beg him to change, not to explain myself, but to put an end to the cycle of manipulation and lies. Ryan called me that morning. His voice was quieter, more subdued, but I could tell he was trying to hold on. "Olivia, I'm sorry for what I said," he began, his words coming out in a rush. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I just want us to work. I can't lose you." I closed my eyes, listening to the familiar tone, but this time it didn't stir anything inside me. I wasn't moved by his apology or his promises. Instead, I felt a quiet strength rising within me. It wasn't the strength of someone angry or defensive, but the strength of someone who knew they had to protect their peace at all costs. "Ryan, I've heard enough," I said, my voice firm. "I've spent enough time listening to your excuses, your promises, but I can't do this anymore. I won't let you manipulate me into thinking this is about love, because it's not. It's about control, and I'm not willing to be controlled." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear his breath, shallow and tight, as if he hadn't expected me to be so resolute. "You don't understand, Olivia," he said, his voice rising slightly. "This is about securing our future, about protecting what we've built together." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, Ryan, this isn't about us. This is about you and your need to own everything. It's about you trying to take control of my life, my work, my future, and I won't let you. I am not your property." His silence was heavy. I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on both of us. I wasn't sure if he understood yet, but I couldn't make him understand. I had to make my decision, and I had to own it. "I'm walking away," I said, each word bringing more finality. "This isn't who I am, and it's not who I want to be with. I need to move on. I need to rebuild my life, and I'm doing that without you." Ryan didn't say anything for a long while, but I could hear him on the other end, his breathing becoming ragged, his anger boiling just beneath the surface. But I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. "I think you're making a huge mistake," he finally muttered. "You'll regret this." "I won't," I replied, and for the first time I felt absolute certainty in my voice. "I won't regret standing up for myself. I won't regret putting myself first." With that, I hung up the phone. And just like that, I let go. I let go of the man I had thought I knew, of the future I had imagined, and of the idea that love meant giving up my own identity. I wasn't going to let anyone take my power again, not even Ryan. It was freeing. The weight that had hung over me for weeks, months even, finally started to lift. And as the day went on, I felt something shift inside me. This was the turning point. Not just in my relationship with Ryan, but in my life. That evening, I decided to go for a walk. I had spent so much time cooped up inside, processing everything, that I hadn't given myself the time to just be. I walked through the streets, feeling the cool evening air on my skin, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Not as Ryan's fiancé, not as someone's partner, but as me. I was starting to realize that who I was and the life I had created for myself was enough. I didn't need anyone to validate me, and I didn't need anyone to make me feel whole. I was whole on my own. The realization was both empowering and terrifying, but it also felt like a weight had been lifted. I was going to rebuild my life, and I was going to do it on my terms. As I walked back home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow anyone to take control of my life again. The man I loved was gone, but in his place was someone stronger. Someone who would no longer be a passive participant in her own life. I had taken control, and I was ready for whatever came next. The days following my final confrontation with Ryan felt surreal. The weight of the decision I had made still lingered, but I knew it was the right one. As much as it hurt, I had chosen myself. I had chosen my independence, my work, and my future. The man I had loved, the life I had envisioned with him, was now nothing but a memory. But I wasn't going to dwell in the past. I was moving forward, and nothing was going to stop me. But Ryan wasn't going to let it go. I had expected some kind of fallout, but I wasn't prepared for how intense it would be. For the first few days, he didn't contact me. I assumed he was processing, but soon enough, the calls started again, this time more frantic, more desperate. His voice was pleading, trying to make me doubt myself, to make me question if I had made the wrong choice. "Olivia, please," he said one afternoon when I picked up the phone, expecting silence. "I don't know what to say to make you understand, but you're making a mistake. This is our future we're talking about. You've thrown it all away over a piece of paper." I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as I listened to him, but I had to remind myself this wasn't about a piece of paper. It was about respect. It was about trust. It was about equality. "Ryan," I said, cutting through the haze of his words, "this isn't about the prenup anymore. This is about how you see me. You don't see me as your partner. You see me as someone to control, and I won't stand for that." He fell silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Then his tone shifted, becoming colder. "Fine," he said with a bitter laugh. "You want to throw it all away. You want to pretend like we never had anything. But remember this, Olivia. No one will ever love you like I did." I hung up before I could hear anything else. His words stung, but they didn't cut as deep as they used to. Because I knew he was wrong. I wasn't the one throwing everything away. He was. As the days passed, I started to see the consequences of my decision unfold. At first, it seemed like Ryan was just trying to convince me to come back. But then, things began to escalate in ways I hadn't expected. One morning, I received a letter from Ryan's lawyer. My stomach sank as I read the contents. It was a legal claim, filed against me, alleging that I was trying to deprive him of his rights to our shared property, our house, our finances, everything he had demanded. It felt like a slap in the face. He was using the legal system to try and intimidate me into submission, to take everything I had worked for. It was clear to me now, he wasn't just trying to control me in our relationship, he was trying to control me in every aspect of my life. I immediately contacted my lawyer, Victoria, who had helped me navigate my business dealings before. She had always been tough, and I knew she would stand by me in this fight. "Olivia, don't worry about this," Victoria said after reviewing the papers. This is a frivolous claim. He has no legal grounds to demand anything from you. You've been independent long before you met him, and everything you've worked for is yours and yours alone." Even with her words of reassurance, the pressure of the situation began to build. The next few weeks were filled with phone calls and meetings with my lawyer as we prepared to fight the legal claim. But there was something more devastating than the legal battle itself. The people around me started to get involved. Ryan's family, his mother, and a few of his closest friends began to turn on me. They called me selfish, ungrateful, and said that I was ruining his life. At first, I tried to stand strong, reminding myself that I had done nothing wrong. But the constant barrage of guilt-tripping and manipulation wore me down. They were playing on my emotions, trying to make me feel like I was the villain in this story. Then came the final blow. One of Ryan's old friends, someone I had always trusted, called me to tell me something I wasn't prepared for. "Olivia," she said, her voice quiet and serious, "I just wanted you to know that Ryan's been telling people you've been the one who's been after his money. He's telling everyone that you were the one who pushed him to sign the prenup in the first place." I felt my blood run cold. How could he do this? I had been the one betrayed, the one who had been manipulated, and now he was turning the tables to make me the villain? I could feel the weight of the entire situation press down on me. It wasn't just about Ryan anymore, it was about everyone around us. His friends, his family, they were all making me out to be the bad guy. But I couldn't let that stop me. I couldn't let them rewrite the narrative. I contacted Victoria again, telling her about the situation. She was furious. "Don't let them gaslight you, Olivia," she said. "This is about your rights, your future. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself." Her words reignited the fire in me. I had made the decision to walk away, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me doubt it. Not even Ryan's manipulative tactics, not even his family's guilt trips. The legal battle wasn't over yet, but I felt stronger. I had made it through the worst of the emotional toll, and now I was ready for the fallout to play out. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't backing down. And slowly, very slowly, I started to see the ripple effects of my decision. People started reaching out. Friends, colleagues, even strangers, telling me how much they admired my strength. I began to realize that by standing up for myself, I was helping others stand up for themselves too. The more I leaned into my own truth, the more I reclaimed my power. I wasn't just fighting for my own life anymore. I was fighting for something bigger, something that would ripple through my community, empowering other women to take control of their own futures. Ryan could try to destroy my reputation. He could try to tear me down. But in the end, I would come out on top. And as the days passed, I began to believe that more and more. It's been a few months since that phone call with Ryan, since the final confrontation that marked the end of everything we once shared. The legal battle eventually died down, as expected. Ryan's claims were dismissed in court, and everything that had been taken from me in the name of love, my peace of mind, my sense of security, was slowly returned. But what was returned wasn't just my property or my business, it was my sense of self. The journey from the emotional wreckage I had been in to where I stand now wasn't easy. There were nights when I doubted myself, when the weight of what I'd endured crushed me again. The accusations, the manipulations, the gaslighting, they all took their toll. But I kept moving forward, and little by little, the pieces of my life came back together. I remember sitting down one evening after everything had settled, after the dust had cleared, and looking out the window of my apartment. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. I wasn't looking back. I wasn't mourning what I had lost. I was embracing what I had gained. Through all of this, I learned the most important lesson of all: never lose yourself for someone else. No matter how much love you feel, no matter how much you believe in the potential of a relationship, your worth cannot and should not be defined by someone else. I had allowed Ryan's actions to make me question my value, but I came to realize that I was always enough. I built my life on my terms, and I had every right to protect it. I learned that love doesn't come with conditions, and it certainly doesn't come with ownership. Love should lift you up, support you, and allow you to grow, not trap you in a cage of someone else's making. As for Ryan, his life continued in the same direction it always had, but I no longer played a part in it. I no longer allowed his story to intersect with mine. And as much as I once thought I couldn't live without him, I now knew I was far better off without the manipulation, the control, and the constant questioning of my worth. In the aftermath, I found myself not just recovering, but thriving. My business flourished. I found new clarity in my personal relationships, and I allowed myself to embrace the things that truly mattered: my passions, my ambitions, and the love I could give without conditions. I also found a new sense of sisterhood. I began mentoring young women in my field, helping them to see their own value and teaching them that their work, their talents, and their lives were worth protecting. And as I helped others rise, I realized that my journey wasn't just about what I survived. It was about how I could help others rise above the same challenges. This journey has shown me that our stories, no matter how painful or challenging, are the keys to our growth. And when you choose yourself, when you stop allowing someone else's actions to define your worth, that is when true freedom begins. I'm not the woman I was before I met Ryan. I'm stronger, more confident, and more resilient. And above all, I am free.